It all started with nothing. A beat-up two-stroke, a small garage, and a handful of tools. Every late night, every polished part, and every setback led to this. From rust to glory. From a pile of parts to a machine built by hand. My name is Aidan Babineau, and this is my 1999 KX250 garage build. But to understand how we got here, you need to know where it all started. When I was 13, I got my first dirt bike. A 2004 KLX 125L. I still remember it like it was yesterday. I covered it in stickers because I thought it looked cool, but that bike was freedom. It's where it all started.
Oh, that was awesome! That is sick.
At first, it was just me and my best friend Nick. He had a CRF 100, and the two of us would spend every free minute riding. We'd rip around the neighborhood, through the powerline trails, and push those little machines to the limit. But before long, we joined the neighborhood crew, and that's where the real adventures began. By the time I got to high school, all I cared about was riding. I spent every dollar from my gas station job just to race the J-Day Off-Road Series, a New England off-road race circuit. Every weekend, my best friends and I would load up the bikes, hit the road, and chase races across New England. We were young, dumb, and didn't have a care in the world. Just good bikes, good friends, and a full tank of gas. At the center of it all was my buddy Kevin, the man of the squad.
Let's get it, kid!
He was fast, winning races left and right, climbing through the classes until he took home the A-Class championship and went pro in 2021. Watching him rip pushed all of us to get better. Those days taught me everything about riding. How to push, how to fail, and how to keep going. And in between races, I spent hours online watching builders like Cam Niemela and Tyler Monaghan. At the time, I never thought I'd try to become one of them, but something about those garage builds stuck with me. After high school, I went off to college to study mechanical engineering at the University of Connecticut. Half a year in, the world shut down. COVID hit, and suddenly, I was back home. Same garage, same friends, and way too much free time. That's when we had an idea. Before Flow 1, before the builds, before the cameras. It was me, Nick, and our other friend Johnny. We started buying old bikes, fixing them up, and flipping them.
Another day at work. 17 YZ250F first start.
One after another. Over 30 bikes rolled through that little garage. We called it BBT Flips. Babineau, Bassett, Tyler. Just three kids wrenching, learning, and chasing the next project. Looking back, we never filmed any of it for YouTube. Maybe if we did, this channel would have grown faster, but honestly, I don't regret it. Those were some of the best times of my life. Late nights, cheap tools, and my two boys running our first business. Eventually, life moved on. I went back to college, finished my degree, and landed a solid engineering job. But something was missing. The adventure was gone. So I partnered back up with Johnny, and we decided to buy our first camera. We had no idea what we were doing. We just started filming rides with the boys, learning how to shoot, how to edit, and how to tell stories. That's when Flow 1 was born. After a while, I knew I had to build something that truly represented what this was all about. The craft, the culture, and the feeling of creating something from nothing. That's when I found it. A tired, weathered 1999 KX250.
Fresh Cali.
Dude, that thing's a ripper.
This is not a good idea, but I don't know.
It doesn't come up on camera how sketchy it is. This might do us justice right here. These trees, yeah.
Now to preface this build, my goal was simple. Build the best dirt bike I possibly could with what I had. No fancy shop, no special tools, and no sponsors. Just me, a garage, and a dream to build something incredible. I'd flipped plenty of bikes before, but this was a whole different world. Every single nut, bolt, bearing, and seal had to either be restored or replaced. It was a huge challenge, but I didn't care. I knew it was going to be tough, but nothing, and I mean nothing, was going to stop me from finishing this build.
guys think we know what we're doing? We don't. We've never taken a dirt bike this far apart before. The only way to do it is to learn. Alright boys, it's the next day. 17 degrees outside today, and we're roasting some jack nuts on the open fire.
While Johnny was roasting his jack nuts, I was figuring out what to do next. The frame was to be sent out to powder for a fresh coat of Kawasaki green. The garage was littered with parts, all laid out across the floor, ready for a second life. But before we could start anything else, we had to tackle the heart of it all, the engine.
Reeds coming out.
Reeds haven't been out since 1999.
Reeds are mint.
Oh, dude, that smells so good. Oh, why was that one not on tight at all?
Butter.
Oh, of course, right? And the camera comes out, comes right off. What are we looking like? K-Yod?
Looks decent. Could use a cleanup, obviously. Nothing major, no big Mars or anything. Piston, the wear's not terrible.
Piece by piece, we slowly tore it down, organizing every part into labeled bags so nothing would get lost. It's one of those moments where the garage looks like a disaster, but to me, it was progress.
So when you're pulling out the studs on these, I like to take nuts, double nut them, like go back to back with the nuts, and then you just take 2 wrenches, you tighten them down. Normally, if they're not seized in there too bad, just spin the whole stud out.
After tearing everything down, I began drafting a long parts list for this rebuild. It was finally time to start bringing some life back into this bike. First up, the exhaust system. The bike came with a full vintage Pro Circuit exhaust. It was in pretty good shape for being over 20 years old. The expansion chamber had no dings, which was a miracle. To help me out with this one, I called in an old friend, the pipe specialist, Mr. Nick.
Flow One by the Fire. It's going to be a little mini learning series within the bike build. This edition, we have the pipe restoration. There's 2 ways people kind of go about polishing these. This is a nickel plating on the outside, and a lot of people like to take these all the way down to the inner core of steel, but that kind of lets these pipes add to the elements to get rusted and things like that. So we're just going to be taking it down through that first sort of layer, just going to be polishing it up. As you can see on the back, kind of super rusted. We've got 2 wheels over here. We've got a more coarse rough wheel we'll be using, and also a fine wheel here. We use the rough wheel to get in some of these more gritty areas and get off all that tough stuff, and then we'll use this fine wheel over here to polish it up. As you can see on the back, kind of super rusted. Shout out Prime for sending us these Scotch-Brite wheels. We have a bunch more in the mail. I'm gonna start the polishing down here on this end. Using this 8-inch bench grinder. You can get this thing on Amazon. Super cheap, gets the job done. When you're doing this, one thing to note, you don't want to push too hard into the wheel. You want to use enough pressure that you're taking off all this outside residue, but you don't want to push down too hard in one spot that you're kind of digging into this nickel plating on the outside. Another thing to note here when you're doing your polishing on the bench grinder, you kind of want to run it all in the same direction, kind of in the flow of the pipe here, because if you start to turn your pipe in weird angles and you're rotating this way and going the opposite direction, you'll get weird texture marks here. We're going to come back with the fine grit one and polish this all up. It's pretty shiny as of now, but one more pass with that fine grit wheel, things will be looking more complete.
Big thanks to the pipe specialist for the initial buff on the expansion chamber, but we still had to get into all those hard to reach spots on the exhaust. To do that, I picked up a set of Prime MX Scotch-Brite wheels for my die grinder, but of course, things didn't go as planned. The power in the garage died, my little compressor was pulling too much amperage to keep the die grinder running, so I improvised. I drove to Walmart and grabbed a $20 rotary tool. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to last more than a few minutes, but not only did it finish the exhaust, I ended up using that same tool for the entire rest of the build. We got this thing all buffed out. She's looking pretty fresh so far. We're gonna finish up this exhaust pipe. 90s Pro Circuit with the little end flange that you can't get, which is really cool. Step one, we're gonna degrease this thing. Got the new parts washer set up, and then we're gonna take her over to the buffing wheel, get her nice and buffed out. We're gonna repack it and do some end touches on it and see what we can do. With the exhaust complete, it was time to move on with the restoration process. Next up, the engine cases. They were absolutely caked in dirt. Normally, you'd send your cases out for vapor blasting to strip off all that grime and bring them back to a factory level shine. But this isn't a race shop build, it's a garage build. And since I was working on a budget, I wanted to see if I could save some money with a different approach. So, I decided to run back the prime wheels and see what they were truly capable of. But before I could start brushing, I had to remove all the old bearings and get the cases completely bare.
This isn't good. This thing is completely stripped.
Well, while removing one of the bearing retainers, I accidentally stripped one of the screws. I tried to extract it, but of course, the extractor bolt decided to snap inside the screw.
Gotta love it.
At that point, I knew I was in trouble. So with my last bit of hope, I called up Quinnovations, a top fabrication company local here in Connecticut.
By the grace of God.
Quinnovations LLC, people. As you can see, a nut was welded to the end of the screw in here. Luckily, the threads are still good, no damage done. With all of the bearing retainers removed, the next step was to pull the bearings themselves, leaving the cases completely bare. The plan was simple. Heat the cases in an oven so the bearings would drop right out. But there was one problem. A conventional oven was way too big for my small garage, so once again, I had to improvise. Johnny and I took a trip to Walmart, and after a few laps around the aisles, I found exactly what I needed, a $50 toaster oven. It fit each case perfectly, and even better, it was just the right size for a ton of other small parts I'd be Cerakoting for the build. Without hesitation, I bought it and brought it back to the garage.
Nice chime to it, huh? Wow.
Now, I wasn't originally going to add this part into the video, but I am giving you guys the full story. At this point in the build, Johnny had a lot going on in his life, and he told me he wasn't going to be able to commit to finishing the project. I was a little bit disappointed. We started this whole thing together, we had this vision of building bikes side by side, and suddenly everything was about to change. But life throws curveballs, and sometimes you just have to roll with the punches and adapt. After talking through it, Johnny offered to let me buy out his share of the build and keep the channel moving. As I said before, I was determined to see this project through, so I took him up on it. We're still best friends to this day, and honestly, looking back, it worked out the way it needed to. Part of the reason he stepped away was to embark on his own dream. Johnny has always been obsessed with building things, except instead of dirt bikes, he builds insane diesel trucks. Truly the best of the best. Talking about alien babies.
Alright, we gotta break down my dad's truck since he's the one that funded it. That's a joke. So it's a 2004 Chevy 2500 Duramax, obviously.
Johnny is making some awesome TikToks on his account at BlackCatLLY, and he just started his own YouTube channel at Johnny Tyler, so go give the kid a follow, you won't be disappointed. And Johnny, if you're watching this, love you, brother. Thanks for starting this movement with me and being my best friend. I can't wait to do that collab we've always talked about one day. I got these things curing next to the fire right here. Keep them a little warm. We got to give these things a full 24 hours to cure, and I'll give you guys a full look. I was beyond happy with how the crankcases turned out. For a full at-home job, I'd say they came out excellent. Now, it was time to restore the rest of the engine covers, but this time, I wanted to take things a step further. I was going to Cerakote them. Cerakote is a thin, ceramic-based coating specific to metals, plastics, and other materials. It adds resistance to abrasion, corrosion, chemicals, and impact, and it comes in a wide range of colors, which makes it perfect for custom builds and restorations. The prep alone is a 3-step process that involves sandblasting, an acetone bath, and an oven cure. I'd never used a sandblaster before, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I decided to jump right in. I found a $100 sandblaster on Facebook Marketplace, and I thought I scored a deal until I realized it was way too big for my tiny compressor. After some research, I learned that just about every sandblaster is too big for my setup except for one, the $30 Harbor Freight spray gun sandblaster. And although it wasn't very efficient due to its small media capacity, it got the job done. Using 100 grit aluminum oxide media, I blasted all of the engine covers, wheel hubs, brake calipers, foot pegs, and other small parts on the bike throughout the rest of the build. All the parts went through the same process after sandblasting. 30-minute acetone bath, followed by an outgas at 300 degrees for 1 hour. After that, the parts were fully prepped and ready to spray.
Got the parts sprayed out. I don't know. I think we look pretty good. We might be in business, boys.
Once coated, each piece was flash cured for 30 minutes, then baked in the toaster oven at a minimum of 300 degrees for 1 hour. Here you can see all of the freshly Cerakoted engine covers before I assembled the motor. I'd say they came out pretty good for a toaster oven cure. But before that, I wanted to clean up the cylinder and get it ready for reassembly. I tore it down completely. I disassembled the power valve and cleaned each component one by one with the prime wheels and my Walmart rotary tool. The exterior wasn't terrible, but the paint had a few chips and scratches, and I couldn't justify putting that on a freshly built motor. So, I decided to Cerakote it in a satin aluminum finish, something that looked factory new. However, I can't say the job was easy. I had to be extra careful not to contaminate the cylinder walls, and it barely fit in my little toaster oven. But somehow, we made it work, and it came out perfect. Before reassembly, I needed to clean up the cylinder bore. And before I get chirped in the comments, according to Rocky Mountain ATVMC, it's totally fine to use a Tusk ball hone on a Nicosil plated cylinder. Once I carefully cleaned it out, I could finally see the real condition of the bore. What looked like surface rust at first turned out to be chips in the Nicosil plating, which meant bare aluminum was exposed and I couldn't use it as is. At that point, there was really only one option: a full replate. So I boxed it up and shipped it off to Power Seal USA, a company that specializes in Nikasil cylinder plating and repair. I also originally planned to run a brand new hot rods crank in the engine, but after talking with a few professionals, I decided to rebuild the OEM crank instead with a new rod and bearing. I brought it over to X-Pro in Andover, Connecticut, a local dirt bike machine shop that's been around forever. With the engine build on delay, I had to keep the build going, so I turned my attention to the next major component, the wheels. The wheels had the kind of wear you'd expect after 25 years. Scuffed rims, faded hubs, and plenty of miles on them. But it was nothing I couldn't bring back to life. I wanted to switch things up from the original look and give these something that felt a little more trick. But like everything on this build, we were on a budget and brand new wheel sets are expensive. So I came up with a plan. Reuse the old hubs, lace them with fresh rims and spokes, and build the wheels myself. To add some color and depth, I decided to Cerakote the hubs in tungsten, a dark bronze gray. After the 3-step prep, I sprayed the coating and cured them in the toaster oven. And honestly, they came out really sick. I couldn't have been happier with the finish. Once the hubs were done, I pressed in new bearings and seals and prepared to lace the wheels. After asking my Instagram what rim color to go with, I landed on black Tusk rims. For the price, the build quality was pretty impressive. Now, lacing a wheel seemed pretty intimidating to me at first, but once you find the rhythm, it's actually not so hard. To lace the wheels, I started by dropping the spokes into the hub, spreading anti-seize on each of the threads, half of them facing in one direction and half of them facing the other. And each one has to line up with the exact right hole on the rim. Once you get the first few in, the rest start to fall into place. As the spokes slide through the holes in the rim, you thread the nipple onto each one. It's important to tighten them as evenly as possible so the wheel pulls together straight. By the time the last spoke went in, they finally started looking like wheels. After they were fully assembled, I brought them over to the truing stand and worked them in as straight as I could. For my first time truing wheels, I was pretty happy with it. Now for the final step of the wheel build, we have the tire install. And I did it the poor man's way, with a bucket, some WD-40, and a set of tire irons. Sometimes, that's all you need. For the final step, I added a black mica sprocket and brake rotors. All in, they priced out for about $400, which to me was a great deal. While I was still waiting for the cylinder and crank to come back, I moved on to the next major part of the build, the suspension. I wanted an OEM Plus look that was close to original, but with a factory touch. I started with the shock. First step was a full degrease, and this thing was caked in dirt and grease. Once it was clean, I could finally break it down. I popped off the seal head cap, drained the oil, and started disassembling the shock body. After 25 years of never being touched, this thing did not want to come apart, but with a little force, I got it separated. Since I was installing a new seal head and shock bumper, I had to remove the shim stack from the shock shaft. The shim stack controls how fast oil moves through the shock, and it's held in place with a peen washer, which is basically a factory lock that keeps the assembly together. The only way to remove it is to grind it off. Luckily, the process went smoothly. Now, it was time to rebuild. First, I had to clean up the threads on the shock shaft, and shout out to Kyle at KJM Performance for getting those dialed. Then I reassembled everything. A new shock bumper from Prime MX, a new seal head kit, the valve shim stack, and a new KYB nut. Next, I had to clean up the shock body. I decided to polish it to a glossy finish using the Prime wheels, and then I coated it in Cerakote MC5100 clear for protection. Finally, it was time to assemble the shock. Oil went into the shock body and I bled it by moving the shock shaft in and out until every last air bubble was gone. With the internals seated and the circlip installed, the last step was to add nitrogen and reinstall the spring. The coil still had really clean OEM paint, so I decided to keep it original. With the shock reassembled, I pressed in a new upper shock bearing and seals, and the shock was officially complete. Compared to the shock, the forks were in way worse condition. There were gouges and scratches all through the anodizing, so the tubes are going to need a full refinish. The plan was to do a full rebuild with fresh oil, bushings, and seals, so I started by draining the oil and breaking them down. Now, we got the slide hammer action. Try and get it nice in one motion. Bam! To get the forks looking new again, I had to resurface the fork tubes. From the factory, the outer layer is anodized aluminum, and mine were really beat up. To fix them, I really only had two options. Brush out the chips and scratches and have them re-anodized, or, for the budget route, brush them out and apply the Cerakote MC5100 clear coat. I decided to give the Cerakote another shot and see how it would hold up on a set of fork tubes. After brushing them down with the Prime wheels, I sprayed on the clear coat and left them to cure overnight. When I came back the next day, they looked super clean and I was really happy with the finish. Now it was time for the rebuild. Using the fork rebuild kit from All Balls, I installed new seals and bushings. Then I slid the freshly finished fork tubes into place and drove the oil seals in along with the C-clip. Once everything was seated, I filled the forks with fresh 5W oil and bled them by pumping the damper rod until every air bubble was gone. After that, the spring and distance collar went back in, and finally, I torqued the cap onto the damper rod and into the upper fork tube. And just like that, the suspension was complete. With the suspension complete, I moved on to the triple clamps, foot pegs, and axles. At this point, I had restored parts everywhere, and before diving into the engine rebuild, I wanted to start putting some of it together. Most of the hardware on this bike was getting replaced, but the axles were original and needed to be restored. Normally, you'd strip the old finish and re-zinc them, but I wasn't going to do that myself, and I wanted to see if there was another solution. So I got creative. I decided to try Cerakote's Elite Series, which is a thinner, stronger version of their H Series coating and is designed for tight tolerance parts. Turns out, it worked great, and I was still able to slide the axles through the wheel bearings with no issues. After a bunch of hurdles, it was finally time to start the engine build. Here's the fresh cylinder in 3, 2, 1. I began with the cylinder so that once the bottom end was together, I could drop it right on. And just like that, the cylinder is plated. We got this thing done by Power Seal, and they did a great job. First, I chased the threads using Kyle's rethreading taps to make sure everything was smooth, and then it was time to reinstall the power valve. It had been months since I cleaned it, but aside from a little dust, it was ready to go. The 99 KX250 uses Kawasaki's integrated power valve system, better known as KIPS, and it's one of the main features that gives these bikes their signature power character. On these older KX motors, the KIPS works by using a set of valves and linkage arms on the sides of the cylinder that open and close based on RPM. At low RPM, the valves stay closed to build exhaust pressure and give the bikes more low-end torque. As the RPM climbs, the valves open and let the engine breathe, giving that strong mid-to-top hit the KX250 is known for. But for it to work right, everything has to be timed perfectly. So I followed the manual closely, placing each piece of the system in the right spot and lining up the timing marks on the sub-exhaust valves. Once the power valve was back together, all that was left was installing the cylinder covers. What could go wrong, right? Well, I tightened one of the covers just a little too much and the thread sheared instantly. These cast aluminum cylinders are unforgiving. With limited options, I decided to repair it with a Healy coil, so I ordered up a Tusk thread repair kit from Rocky Mountain. Installing a Healy coil is a 3-step process. Drill out the old threads, tap new threads, and install the coil. I added a dab of thread lock so that it would never back out. Thankfully, the repair worked perfectly, and I was able to reinstall the cover without stripping the threads this time. Now that the cylinder was finally done, it was time to build this engine. This was my first full engine rebuild, so I wanted to take my time and be extra careful. Having a printed copy of the manual next to me was essential, and shout out to Greg Hitchko for his in-depth 99 KX250 engine build series. That was clutch to have as a step-by-step guide. I started by pressing all of the new bearings into the cases along with the bearing retainers. Kyle also helped me remove and install the lower clutch arm bearing, which can be a bit difficult on these older Kawasaki's. Once all of the new bearings were in, I dropped the freshly rebuilt crank into the right side case using the classic hot and cold method. Heat the inner race of the bearing so it expands, and freeze the crank so it shrinks a little.
She's in.
When you get it right, everything falls together pretty clean. But the engine didn't exactly start smoothly. It turned out one of my main bearings and one of my transmission bearings weren't seated all the way, and when I bolted the cases together, the crank and transmission had some resistance when I tried to spin them. Super unfortunate, because that meant I had to tear the whole thing back apart. And if you've worked on these older KX250s, you know the crankcases don't use a gasket. They use gasket maker, which is a nightmare to clean up. But I had no choice. So I took it all apart, pulled the crank back out, cleaned up the gasket maker, pressed in a new bearing, and started over. I then reinstalled the transmission and crank, and sealed up the cases and bolted them together. And finally, everything spun perfectly, and we were in the clear. Now it was time to finish this engine build. So sit back and let's listen to Nirvana play some classic 90s music while we put together a 90s Kawi engine.
Recluse torque drive clutch.
Wave washer, flat washer. Thread the stopper tool all the way down, and now we can torque this nut. Before dropping the beautiful engine into the frame, I wanted to at least get the chassis assembled. To do that, I had two more major components to restore, the swing arm and the linkage. I started by tearing everything down. Both pieces were caked in dirt, grease, and 20 plus years of grime, so the first step was a full degrease in the parts washer. The swing arm bearings were still in decent shape, but the linkage bearings definitely needed to be replaced. I began the real work with the swing arm, and I wanted a polished finish, so I first stripped the old paint. I again used the prime wheels, the rough wheel to remove the paint, and the fine wheel to polish. It took an entire weekend to get the brush finish exactly where I wanted it, but it was definitely worth it because the swing arm came out absolutely immaculate. To protect the polished look, I coated it in Cerakote MC 5100 clear and hung it up in the garage to cure. Next up was the linkage. I pressed out the old bearings using 2 sockets and a vise, then polished the linkage using the same process as the swing arm, prime wheels and coating. Once the Cerakote cured, I pressed in new bearings, again using 2 sockets and a vise, and packed everything with fresh grease. The linkage was officially complete. But while we're on the subject of bearings, it was also time to install the steering stem bearings. The lower bearing has a press fit, and I needed a way to press it into place. So I decided to use the no tool method, where you drive the new bearing on with the old one and a rubber mallet. I clamped the triple clamp upside down in the vise and tapped it down onto the new bearing. It's simple and it works. You just have to be careful not to scratch your freshly coated parts. With fresh grease on all the bearings, the swing arm, linkage, and triple clamps were ready to go, and I could finally begin assembling the chassis.
The sun ablaze is mighty as foot touches the surface of sand. I know the land as human contraband. Some leak off of my knees, go past the lane of the bar. She stuffed 10 to a trumpet. She clutches across. Here come the exhaust and it rips through her lungs. She's on fast to the pasture like cattle shall cross degree 106. Sweat and vomit are thrown and she prays and suffocates upon her memories of home. Of Yankee guns for blood debts on her loans. Of smoldering fields, rape, rubble and bones. Of graves hidden, trapped up in visions of war. Of nothing, no one, nobody, no more. These are her mountains and skies and she radiates. Through history's rivers of blood she regenerates. And like the sun disappears, only to reappear. She's eternally here. Her time is near, never conquered but here.
Alright, so we are at the Morello compound. We got the tamper-proof Torx. We're removing the throttle position sensor here, and they want you to have to bring them to the dealer. So that's why they put these in here. Kyle is the dealer.
I actually am a dealer for several product lines.
Exactly.
Now pounding the brain. His presence it terrifies and eclipses the days. No minutes to rest, no moments to pray. And with a whisper he whips her soul chained to his will. My job is to kill if you forget to take your pill. Our justice sisters gather round him and scream as if in a dream. Rise on the crimson stream. Numb as a wrist, spit shots of blood to the floor. I am nothing, no one, nobody, no more. These are her mountains and skies as she radiates. Through history's rivers of blood she regenerates. And like the sun disappears, only to reappear. Maria, she's eternally here. Her time is near, never conquer but here. Let's go away from
So the last big step we got to take before we get this bike started is to polish out the fuel tank. So we're going to be using the Prime plastic polishing kit to restore the tank. All we got to focus on is this section here because that's really the only part that's shown from the side view of the bike. I got the 320 grit wheel on and we can just start by sanding. A little water on the surface. Our Cerakote ceramic trim coat, it's just a restoration type clear coat for plastics. Just gonna give it a nice wet look. So I got the whole tank covered, gonna let it dry for 30 minutes and then we can install it on the bike.
So after I saw some coolant leaking from the head, I realized that the fat head actually does not use the OEM head gasket. Fat head actually lists that in their directions. I just looked over that part, I guess. Got this off. I'm gonna torque the head down again and hopefully we'll have no leaks on the start. Let's fill her up with coolant for the second time.
Well, ladies and gents, I hope you guys have enjoyed this build series so far. A lot of time, money, and effort took me to get to here. Either way, it was worth it to me. It's always been a dream of mine to build something like this, and here we are, almost done with my first machine ever. I'm proud of the work that I've done. I don't know if I could have done any better, to be honest, so I think it's time we see if she fires. She's all rigged up, so without further ado, let's get the first start going. I got this set a little rich at 32-to-1 for braking. Safe to say I'm fired up. This thing runs, and it runs good as of now. I mean, it sounds good. So let's cross our fingers and hope it stays that way. All we have to do left is assemble the rest of it and the brakes, which is the last major part on this bike I gotta do. But this thing is almost done and she runs. So very happy.
On to the last major component before final assembly, the brakes. To match the wheel hubs, I wanted the calipers Cerakoted in tungsten, so I tore the brakes all the way down and went through the full Cerakote prep one last time. Sandblast, acetone soak, and spray, then in for the toaster oven cure. They came out absolutely perfect. I picked up a couple of Tusk caliper rebuild kits from Rocky Mountain, which are cheap but honestly solid quality. Once the calipers were together, I bolted them onto the bike and moved on to the master cylinders. Instead of coating these, I brushed them to a polished finish using the prime wheels. Right at eye level, they add that little bit of shine that makes the whole bike pop. From there, I installed the Galfer steel braided brake lines, the brake lever, brake pedal, and even the fork and swing arm graphics. All that was left before final assembly was to bleed the brakes, the last piece before the build finally came together.
Alright guys, so I found the absolute easiest way to do this after making a huge mess. I got my reservoir cap filled up with fluid, got the catch line right here. So all you're gonna do, crack your bleeder, press down on the brake, it's gonna push fluid out the back of the caliper here. Close the bleeder, let go of the brake, and you should see the fluid level drop in the cap. After 10 long months, the KX250 build is finally complete. I am absolutely stunned by this thing. It looks immaculate. You know, you gotta take the time to do things right, and when you do that, you'll be proud of your work. I'm really proud of this thing. I think it's time we see if she rides, so we're gonna get the GoPro on and we're gonna ride this thing up the street. I can't even believe this. So far, so good.
Well, she runs and drives. What a huge accomplishment. As you guys can imagine, I was ecstatic. Almost an entire year of work, and honestly, my entire life of learning led up to this moment. Now, ripping this thing up the street was great, but I knew I had to open this thing up.
Oh my god.
Now, as much as I wanted to take this thing straight into the dirt, it is super wet in New England this time of year, so I'm yet to suit up and ride this thing at the track. So you'll just have to subscribe and stay tuned for that video. But I wasn't going to leave you guys hanging. Even if I couldn't ride it yet, I managed to get an absolute legend of the sport to throw a leg over this bike and give it an honest review.
Feast your eyes on the class of 1999 Kawasaki KX250. I wish I could take the credit for this one, but this was built by the guy behind the camera, Aidan Babineau from Flow One. You want to check him out on YouTube and Instagram. Just a spectacular build here, Aidan. I saw the pictures, but they didn't do it justice. You didn't miss a beat here on this thing. The devil's in the details. And if you look closely at this bike, it's absolutely spectacular. You got to get in real close and check out all the nooks and crannies and all the things that most people miss. When you powder coat a frame this bright green, everything's got to be perfect. And I'd say this is as close to perfect as it gets. Really impressed with your work, Aidan. Aidan's an up-and-comer. He's got his own YouTube and Instagram channel, and he's an engineer right now working in a nuclear facility, but this is his calling, so I'm going to try to hire him. He's going to be in the industry a long time. This is what he loves to do. He's neighbors with AJ Catanzaro and good friends with the Pachicos, Ethan Pachico, who's an up-and-coming motocrosser and fitness trainer. So walk around this side, show him this side, Aidan. Your work is absolutely spectacular and speaks for itself. Look at the detail work on this engine. It's just next level. It gets different than this, but it doesn't get better than this. And obviously you're very gifted at what you do. So check out Aidan online. Let me get him in front of the camera. Hold on. There he is. This is the mastermind.
This is my build. Thank you very much for the ride. It's awesome to see you wheelie this thing finally. I've been waiting for this day to see Mr. Kaplan wheelie this bike up the street, and we did some justice today.
My pleasure.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the story of this 99 KX250 build. This is truly one of my greatest achievements, and I'm proud to say this thing is officially complete. I just want to say thank you to all the friends, family, and subscribers who have supported me throughout this build. Your support truly means a lot, and you guys were able to push me to make this bike as special as it could possibly be. Now, even though this build is complete, the journey with this bike isn't completely over. This bike will continue to be an icon of the channel, and I do plan to suit up and ride this thing and get a couple pros to spin some laps on it. With the fall weather here in New England, it's super wet, rainy, and cold, and I'd hate to get this thing absolutely caked in mud, so we're gonna wait till next season to break it out and do the ride day. But I can assure you that's definitely something you're not going to want to miss. This also isn't the last big project of this channel. I actually do have a giveaway build sitting right behind me that I'm going to do for you guys, and I can tell you that it's going to be as special as this KX right here. I'll be documenting the entire thing just like I did with this build, so subscribe if you're new because there's a lot more coming. If you are interested to see more details on this bike, you can check out the build list on the Flow One website at www.flowone.shop. Once again, I just want to say thank you all for the support and motivation with this build. It truly means a lot to me, and stay tuned for the next one.